7 ways to enhance your spiritual walk. It's a continuation of my talk last week, the idolatry of perfection. But in this case, what I want to do is explore processes you can use so that you can, within yourself, achieve a closer approximation of divine energy, divine love, of divinity. Now, that's not saying perfection, because none of us can achieve perfection. That in itself is a way to cause ourselves to lose connection with the divine. All of us, it is my belief, it is Quaker belief, are called to listen to the divine spark within, to follow the leadings of the divine spark, to more perfectly reflect God's love, to help effect God's love on this planet and within ourselves. And I found myself thinking of different aspects, different things we can do that can help us get there. Well, actually, there's no getting there. It's always going to be a pathway. I forget which pundit said that the spiritual walk is to seek an ever closer approximation of divine love, divine wisdom. So I'm going to start with item number 1. Find quiet time with the divine. Actually, find isn't the right word. Make sure you have quiet time with the divine. Intend it, do it. And there are so many different ways of having that quiet time. There's no one that is prescribed. You can do meditation. In Quakerism, we call it sitting in silence. There are retreats, there's communing with nature. There are other forms of solitude. But one of the difficulties with life is it's so easy to put off, to not quite get around to the quiet each day because there's so many immediate issues at hand. Gordon MacDonald, the author of, now that I talk about it, I've forgotten his name, Ordering Your Private World, talks about it. He's a pastor and a writer. And he found early in his pastorate how often he didn't get his quiet time, his prayer time, because someone would call and they were in a crisis, or this would happen and he'd feel he needed to take care of it. And finally, he realized what he could do. He writes his time into his calendar. For 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months out, 6 a.m. every morning is booked. His secretary knows that that is sacrosanct time. I'm still not really good at it, but I'm getting better. MacDonald recounts one time, one of his, shall we say, more weighty parishioners called and requested that they have a meeting over breakfast about some important thing the parishioner wanted to talk about. He said, how about 6 o'clock next Wednesday? And MacDonald replied, no, I'm sorry, I'm booked. How can you be booked at 6 a.m.? How about Thursday? No, I'm booked. 6 to 7 a.m. is his sacrosanct time. He doesn't write his sermon then. He doesn't meet with people then. That is his time with the divine, his time with God. In addition, there's the quiet time, the waiting time, if you will, the listening time, but there's also just a being time in silence. Now, the Quakers talk, in their sitting in silence, talk about 3 different phases. There's the going into silence, then there's the silence, where you are open to hearing or feeling nudges or just living in God's perfect peace. And then there's the emerging from silence, where you may have a conversation with the divine. And they're all of a piece. In your private time, be sure you allow for all pieces. Be sure you allow for all pieces. The peace time, the listening time, and the conversation time. You know, you might think of conversation as prayer, because MacDonald incorporates that as part of his hour. And remember, prayer doesn't have to have words. Prayer can be a feeling, it can be a vision, but it's all part and parcel of having that quiet time with the divine. Something that you can know you're having, you can look forward every day. It is your time away from the world and in the peace that passeth all understanding. Critical to do this. 2, consistently identify your blessings, radiate gratitude, acknowledge your gratitude. One idea that I come across often is keep a gratitude book or keep a gratitude list. I encourage, be vocally and internally expressive. I try to maintain gratitude as in the form of an unceasing prayer. Not with words as the Orthodox do, Holy Father, have mercy on me, a sinner, on and on, but a continuous awareness, if you will, on the most shallow side, how lucky I am to be connected with this incredible overbeing of love and concern. And don't hesitate to be joyous with those around you or with people you've never met if it's appropriate. Every once in a while, I wear my collar a lot. And so people can know that I represent a God who cares about them and that I'm available. And often I'm stopped because someone is hurting, is asking for prayer, asking for support of some sort or other. But sometimes people stop me because they are so grateful, something so wonderful, some wonderful experience they just had with God, and they really want to share with someone who won't make fun of them, is my inference. Don't hesitate to share. There's a time for everything, of course. I don't know that I'd share in the middle of a funeral, for instance, unless it happened to be a wake. In that case, that's a different story. But the sharing is another way of lifting, not just yourself, but the energy of the world as a whole. And when you have blessings, don't hoard them. By holding it in, holding the joy inside, you're hoarding. If you win $1 million lottery and you put it in the bank, you're hoarding. But I want to be very careful. I'm not saying give away all that you own. If God has a gift for you, accept the gift. But share the energy at least. Share where appropriate. Don't feel obligated to share, because whatever your blessings, there are people who will want to vampire you and suck those blessings out of you. And I'm not just talking money, I'm talking even joy. There are joy vampires out there. They're toxic. Them, you don't need to share, you need to protect yourself. We're looking for good, we're looking to share love, we're looking to live in love. But we're not looking to allow ourselves to be vampirized, to be sucked dry, to be subject of parasites. Now, part of the reason for identifying blessings, radiating gratitude, sharing gratitude out is something my sister, a shaman in the Chinese tradition, mentions to me every so often. The more you give and acknowledge your gratitude for the good that has come to you, the larger the pipeline for good to come to you becomes. That might feel transactional. I don't recommend it as a pure business transaction. Oh, if I do this, I'll get this. But it doesn't hurt to be aware that your pipeline can become ever greater simply because you are connecting and joyous with the good that comes to you. I have seen some teachers recommend that you actually engage in a ritual each day, morning and evening, twice a day, of giving gratitude prayer. So if, for instance, you're doing that 6 a.m. prayer time like Gordon MacDonald talks about, yeah, you might stick in a gratitude prayer there. But also, at the end of the day, a recap, if you will, of thanksgiving for the good that you've experienced, the good that you've received. I guess I do it thinking about this. In the morning, I welcome all the angels, my ancestors, all those who work with me during the day. In the evening, I thank them for all that they have shared and assisted me with, and I bid them a good night. I hadn't thought of that in terms of blessings and gratitude, but I realize now, yeah, don't give thanks to God, but also recognize those spirits, those beings, those entities, those ancestors who have assisted you this day. And you don't have to call them out, just give thanks. Karen Heister, one of our pagan members, used to lead us, she hasn't recently, but used to lead us in an ancestor ritual every year where we would give thanks to the ancestors who had helped us be who we are now. The ritual phrase, as I recall, was, "We are standing on the shoulders of our ancestors." Don't overlook that when you're saying thank you for your blessings. Okay, third item, let your love flow. Let blessings you can bestow on others flow. Now, I mentioned that we want to avoid transactionalism because then it's just a business proposition. I've been reading a book by a rabbi whose name I do not remember, talking about the Jewish understanding of bringing good into your lives, bringing wealth into your lives. And he talks about things like the tenfold return, for instance. He says, you have to be very careful not to treat it like a business proposition. The good that you're doing, you do because you choose to. It just happens that often enough the divine returns to us in good too. But he says the minute that we turn it into a business transaction, we're walking away from God. We don't need to do that. We shouldn't want to do that. And it can lead to a real dryness of understanding of some of the depths of giving. So share, give divine love to those who are hurting, to those who perhaps have been deprived of the opportunity to experience the love that we all need and deserve here on this earth. But give divine love to people whom you may never have seen before in your life and may never see again too. I've mentioned this before, but we have enough new people, I'll mention it again. My mother did that. She might be walking down the street. In fact, it used to embarrass the heck out of me when I was a teenager. And she sees, I remember one, a little old lady, bright white hair, bright white coat, bright red lipstick. And as we were walking down the street and passed her, my mother looked at her and said, "You make that red coat look so good," and just kept right on walking. Talk about leaving a blessing. When my mother died, I was unable to make it. And so we postponed the wake, the memorial, until about 3 months later. And when we held it, I was astonished to see the number of tradespeople from that small town who came. And they came because they were missing the fact that she always had a kind word, a good word for them when she visited. She'd compliment the butcher on how well he cut the meat, as the one that I remember. The butcher was there. Each of us is unique in our ability to take the love within, to share it out to people who may not be expecting anything at all good that day. Or even if they are, we can make their day a little better. And in doing so, we're lifting ourselves up and we're lifting others up, and thus the world as a whole. Mother Teresa had a saying that I found: spread love everywhere you go, first in your own house. Let no one ever come to you without leaving better and happier. Be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your face, kindness in your eyes, kindness in your smile, kindness in your warm greeting. I'm going to read that again because I think it is so full of impact. Spread love everywhere you go. First of all, in your own house. Let no one ever come to you without leaving better and happier. Be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your face, kindness in your eyes, kindness in your smile, kindness in your warm greeting. Now, let me mention and note parenthetically, some people hate it when you do this. Some people are happy only when they're unhappy. And you're not going to see them respond positively. But you don't have to take it in. You're spreading good. You're not responsible for how they respond to it. You keep yourself, I call it wearing a raincoat, from those who live with toxicity or need toxicity. Fourth way to enhance your spiritual walk: connect with a community of seekers after the divine. Or you can connect with several. Examples and possibilities: there's a church community. If the church community has people who are seeking and loving and understanding in ways similar to you or in ways supportive of you. This community here, we welcome everyone who's seeking. Well, I suppose there's someone, if they claimed they were seeking but they were spreading toxicity, that we would be less happy. We'd be praying for them. But a recent study says that 60% of people who go to a church go there not for spiritual growth, but because they need a community, and they're counting on the church to provide them their community. There's also retreats, pilgrimages, meditation groups, prayer circles, informal gatherings of friends to share or pray together. And I'm sure there are lots of others I'm not even thinking of. But that connection can help support you in your spiritual walk, in your seeking. support you when you're feeling lost or battered. We all need connection. We all need connection, and this is one way of having it. It can create that sense of mutual support. Or if you have a concern, people who can pray with you, care with you. And being with this community creates a spiritual energy center that not only can lift you up, but lifts everyone up, and often radiates outside the group itself, whether they're aware of it or not. My time of greatest sense of connection is when I've been, say, in a Quaker meeting, and it was a truly deep Quaker meeting, and when we break at the end, it's like I'm floating a couple feet off the ground. When you're able to find that sort of connection, treasure it, grow with it, live in it. Then your action number 5, intentionally spread visible divine caring. What my mother did often enough would fit that. One of the references I was reading uses this quote from Numbers, allegedly from Moses. And it's one that you know, but think of it as a way that you can ritualize spreading divine caring and blessing. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Now, in my religious background, I'm used to seeing a preacher say that up there on the podium at the end of service, but it doesn't have to be limited to that. You can wish that, give that as a caring in so many places. And then the Arabs, every time they meet each other, translated, of course, peace be upon you, as well as the mercy of God and his blessings. And I'm sure you can find words that carry for you. Make the practice of sharing that broad sense of divine caring, that uplifting, that well-wishing. Even at the close of a letter or an email, with all good wishes. Winston Churchill joked that if the devil came out and came on the side of the Allies, he would at least end his letters to the devil with all good wishes, because he was on the side of angels whether he knew it or not. So we don't have to say this just to the people who are following our path, who have good energy. We can wish well even to the most lost. And you never know what well wish might be the one that gets through a chink in the armor of the hurting or of the lost and helps them lift up just a little bit more. And as you spread visible divine caring to others, whether you do it from this intent or not, your spiritual frequency lifts up. And so often I've seen the fact that you are caring without transaction, without making a business deal of it. Often enough, one way or another, that higher frequency, that caring redounds back to you. Father Chuck, for those of you who knew, Father Chuck Smith founded the Ohio Orthodox Catholic Church, a non-Roman Catholic church. He's Franciscan. And it's been a lonely journey. He told me once of a time he'd had a rough day at the work he had to do to pay his way. Really rough. He was tired. He got home, walked into the sanctuary, and just started telling God he'd had it. He was quitting. He took off the rope from his robe. He took off the robe, threw it all on the altar, walked downstairs to the basement apartment where he lived. He'd had it. About half an hour later, and for 2 hours, the phone didn't stop ringing with people, some of whom he hadn't talked to for years, calling to give him such deep thanks for how he had salvaged their lives, the difference he'd made in their lives. Now, he was just doing what he was called to in terms of loving. And he is among the most loving clergy I know. But sometimes God sends it back when we need it. It's happened to me a couple of times, not as dramatically as Father Chuck, when I was feeling really low. And maybe one person or two people would call and thank me for the caring, the love I showed them. And I didn't think I was doing anything special. And yet it meant something to them. Don't ever think that your caring is meaningless. Don't ever doubt that if you feel led to share caring, even in its most simple phases, that you aren't carrying out part of your walk toward a more perfect example, a more perfect living of God's love. Then the sixth item, in your walk day by day, be omnivorously acquisitive of spiritual understanding and wisdom. Look for opportunities. Discover opportunities where they may be unexpected, whether it's in the written word, whether it's in the spoken word, whether it's observing good examples that you see, or whether it's through working with a spiritual coach or a spiritual guide. All of us can stand to be wiser. All of us can stand to be wiser, but it may come in ways that are unexpected. You don't have to go to church on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays in order to become wise. You shouldn't assume that any single source is the be-all and end-all of wisdom. That's where we tend to head toward dealing with cults. Not even the Bible. You know, Bart Ehrman says there's 35,000 errors in translation, forgeries, and intentional changes in the Bible, in the New Testament alone. But that doesn't mean there isn't good to be gained from the Bible, from the Quran, from the Gujarata, from someone next door, from another pastor, from my wife. I learned so much from her. She holds my feet to the fire quite often, for which I am grateful, dear. And then finally, thinking of all these 6 ways I've talked about to enhance your spiritual walk, keep in mind, be gentle with yourself. We are imperfect. We will never, in this lifetime at any rate, be the equivalent of a God, unless we are deluded. we should never expect to encounter the equivalent of God on this planet, because there's nothing 100% perfect on this planet. We will need self-forgiveness as well as willingness to forgive the shortcomings in others. We need to give ourselves encouragement, particularly when life doesn't seem to be flowing well, or love does not seem to be flowing well. Gentle encouragement, not the lash. I do, by the way, have deep discomfort with people who feel, and I've known a couple, that every so often you should whip yourself to prove your love for God. But I've learned it's not my job to tell them. I just know what I've experienced with the divine. Be gentle with yourself. Allow yourself resilience when you fall short in your estimation, or when the world seems to fall short in your experience. If we are not gentle with ourselves, we are instead anchoring ourselves to the limitedness that is available on this earth, as opposed to the unlimitedness of walking toward the divine, seeking closer connection with the divine, allowing ourselves to be loved by the divine and to love our fellow travelers.